I don't actually camp, but I love watching people do it, partly for the calm competence of it, partly for the quiet ritual. On YouTube, you can jump from old-school bushcraft, someone like Dave Canterbury moving through the woods with a blade, cordage, and a practiced eye, to the other extreme, tech camping channels like Fish 13, where the kit looks like a portable lab. The aesthetics are totally different, but the gesture is the same. No matter the philosophy, no matter the gear, they all begin the same way. They build a base. First comes the site selection, then the shelter line, then a fire or heat source, then water, then storage, then a working area. They establish a perimeter, sometimes literal, sometimes just implied by how the space is arranged, drawing a boundary between inside and outside, mine and wild. The forest is never met as is. Even the most minimalist camper immediately starts layering the world. A roof against weather, insulation against cold, fire against darkness, tools against friction, routines against uncertainty. Survival begins as architecture. And watching enough of these videos, something uncanny starts to surface. It almost feels less like people going into nature and more like a landing party from the Enterprise stepping onto an alien planet. Scan the terrain, deploy the equipment, establish a safe zone, maintain life support. Different centuries' aesthetics, leather belt pouches versus titanium cookware and power banks, but the same underlying posture. We are here, but not quite of here. The wilderness is treated not as a home to merge into, but as an environment to be negotiated through layers. This isn't merely a hobby pattern, it looks like a species signature. Strip the scene of brands and personalities, and what remains is a recognizable human reflex, the need to place a membrane between body and planet, to translate exposure into enclosure, to turn nature into something habitable. That reflex is what I want to name in this essay, the chronic colonist, the creature who, wherever he lands, begins by building a small world inside the world. There is a simple way to describe the human being that is so obvious it tends to disappear. We do not inhabit Earth directly. We inhabit a second Earth, made of roof and fire, clothing and tools, language and calendars, rights and laws, and, today, of invisible waves that thread the air. Strip these layers away, and you do not find a natural human waiting beneath the skin. You find a being in deprivation, as though removed from its proper element. Nakedness is not a return, it is exile. I call this trait the chronic colonist, the persistent impulse to turn the world into a base, to place mediations between body and planet, to refuse exposure as fate. The chronic colonist is not the romantic explorer of wilderness. He is the creature who, the moment his feet touch ground, begins to isolate it, measure it, enclose it, stabilize it. He does not integrate with the environment, he reconfigures it. This idea is not limited to technology in the narrow sense. A tent is technology, but so is a kinship rule, a dietary taboo, a language. The first human shelter may not have been a hut, but a symbolic order, a web of meanings that draws a line between inside and outside, safe and threatening, ours and the world. Before any engineering, there is a fundamental philosophical operation, turning the cosmos into a livable stage by means of filters. The chronic colonist is born, then, from a basic metaphysical experience. Earth is not home, it is condition. And condition, by definition, is what precedes us and does not adapt to us. Nature offers no apologies. It does not reorganize itself around our comfort. Cold is not malice. Illness is not intention. Hunger is not punishment. They are simply the indifference of the real. Faced with that indifference, humanity did not choose to harden the body like a beast. It chose to invent an expanded body. The prosthesis, the garment, the house, the village, the city. Technology, then, is less an expression of dominion than a technique of reconciliation. It tries to resolve a contradiction. We want to live, yet living is exposure. We want to endure, yet the world is change. We want meaning, yet the universe is mute. The chronic colonist responds in the only way he knows, by producing an intermediate layer between desire and chaos, a membrane in which the world becomes legible and manageable. That is why technology appears early and appears everywhere, even under the most primitive conditions. The myth of the natural man is, at bottom, a myth of the urban observer. Someone imagines there exists a human life without mediation, the way there exists a wolf's life without utensils. But the human without mediations is not more natural, it is less human. Not because it lacks dignity, but because it lacks what defines the species, the capacity and the compulsion to fabricate an artificial niche. And yet we must acknowledge the ambivalence of that compulsion. The chronic colonist protects himself from the planet and, at the same time, separates himself from it. He lives by mediation and, at the same time, sickens from it. The more perfect the technical layer becomes, the more the world turns into a mere screen background, external noise, abstract threat. At one end, technique is shelter, at the other, alienation. The house saves us from cold, but it also makes us forget the wind. The city secures food, but it breaks our bond with season and soil. The digital network expands presence, but it thins our being here. The membrane that protects also numbs. Here a decisive philosophical point emerges. Chronic colonization can be read as a response to the metaphysical trauma of contingency. We are the animal that knows it might not be, the animal that anticipates loss, the animal that experiences itself as thrown into a world without guarantee. Nature, for us, is not merely environment. It is the reminder that we do not control the conditions of existence. Technique arises as counterspell. If I cannot abolish contingency, I can at least create pockets of predictability. In this sense, chronic colonist is not a moral accusation. It is an ontological diagnosis. We are a species that lives as though always arriving. Even when we establish civilizations, we act like those who must reinforce the perimeter, expand the stockpile, guarantee redundancy. Our dwelling is never mere habitation, it is installation. And installation presupposes threat, precarity, exteriority. Hence a provocative hypothesis. Perhaps the human difference lies less in being rational than in not enduring the real in its raw state. The human is the being who must cook food, heat air, explain death, measure time, narrate origins. His rationality is inseparable from his vulnerability. Notice this. Technique does not begin when the human feels powerful. It begins when he feels fragile. The first tool is not a scepter, it is a defense. Fire is not spectacle, it is refuge. Law is not luxury, it is the attempt to stabilize violence. Today, this condition has reached a strange apex. When the technical layer becomes total, when it mediates light, conversation, desire, work, memory, colonization turns back upon the colonist. The chronic colonist colonizes not only the world, but his own interiority. He builds narratives, identities, habits, behavioral software, and without noticing, turns the spirit into a condominium. External technique replicates itself as internal technique. Self-control, self-image, self-optimization, time management, life organization, anxiety control. It is no accident that contemporary language has become so administrative. We are not only colonists of the planet, we are colonists of ourselves, and the base has grown so vast it is no longer a base. It has become the world. And then the inevitable philosophical question arises. If there is no human without mediation, is there a human without a world? And if the world is now a construction, what earth remains beneath our feet? Perhaps the answer is not to fantasize about unfiltered contact with reality. No animal, least of all the human, ever meets the world without a sieve. Perception is selection, attention is exclusion, meaning is an edit. Even the barest gaze is already an interface. The problem, then, is not that we have filters. The problem is that we have forgotten which filters we are using, and we have begun to treat our most convenient mediations as if they were the structure of reality itself. A wise chronic colonist does not abolish technique. He becomes literate in mediation. He learns to distinguish support from substitute, map from territory, instrument from horizon. Without imagining, he can step outside all instruments. What matters is not purity, but orientation. Whether our layers remain transparent enough to let the world resist us, correct us, and exceed our models, or whether they harden into a closed environment where everything arrives pre-digested, pre-approved, already tame. This is where philosophy earns its oldest task, not the romantic recovery of immediacy, but the critique of the cave we no longer recognize as a cave. Philosophy names the membrane, tests its seams, asks what it hides, what it protects, what it costs. It does not promise access to a world without mediation. It asks for a world in which mediation remains answerable to something beyond itself, some standard of truth, measure, and the good that our systems cannot manufacture by convenience alone. And that question, answerable to what, is the threshold to the next essay. For if the human being is irreducibly a maker of interfaces, then the most decisive interface may not be technological at all, but metaphysical. The soul's orientation toward what Plato called the intelligible. Perhaps our chronic colonization is not merely a survival strategy gone too far, but a symptom of a deeper displacement. A creature attempting to build stability in the sensible because it carries, half-remembered, the demand for a stability the sensible cannot provide. If so, the real drama is not filters versus no filters, but shadows versus forms. And the question becomes whether our newest cave is only a brighter cave or the first stage of an ascent we have not yet learned how to name.